Hi you guys. Feels like I'm doing a cooking show today. We got a bunch of tomatoes from the garden. God, look at how beautiful. Look at how beautiful. This one weighs more than a pound by itself. And we're going to water bath can some crushed tomatoes. So what I'm doing right now, I want to bring you guys along for the ride, is I'm taking the tomatoes that I've saved up, making an X in the back because I want to remove these skins, right? Before I cook these tomatoes down and before I process them into the cans. I'm going to leave the core in, but I'm going to put this X on the back, and then I'm going to drop them in boiling water. These I just put in here. And oh, the skin's starting to peel up on this one. So they only go in for a couple minutes, and then you move them from boiling water over to ice cold water with your slotted spoon. Save your hands. And then let's take one that's already processed. Look how big and God, look how beautiful. Heirloom tomatoes, people, save your seeds. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove the skin. And I've got a bowl over here. I'm putting all the extra in. Oh, that one doesn't really want to come off. But I need to remove the core now because I'm going to put it in this bowl over here that you can see I've got other tomatoes in. And then what I need to do is put all that into a pot and process it. Don't worry, I've written all the instructions down below. I'm taking this from the ball canning book recipe. So I'm going to set this down on a cutting board. If you're old school like me and have been doing this for a long time, then you can probably do this in your hand. But tomatoes are slippery, especially when they've been peeled. I often do this in my hand, but I can tell you the other day I cut my thumb. So, it's humbling. That goes into the scrap. This peeled and trimmed up piece, this area here, it's a crack. That needs to come out. Oh, look at all that juice. Beautiful. And then I will go ahead and put it in this bowl. Now, eventually these are going to be quartered, so I could go ahead and do that now, but I'm just kind of doing my routine here since that boiling water doesn't take very long. I'm going to do that piece of it later. So I'm just going to take out this little bit, take off the rest of the skin, any cracks, any blemishes, I'm going to go ahead and remove, and then I'm going to put it in this bowl over here to process in a little bit. So I'll continue. Fresh tomatoes, X on the bottom, into the boiling water. After they've been in the boiling water for a couple minutes, like 2 minutes, into the ice water, and then peel. So I'm going to go ahead and get to that until all those are done, and then we'll come back and talk. Wanted to talk a real quick second about tomatoes that have blight on the bottom. Let's see if I have any more here. I don't think so. This is the blighty. Oh, that's kind of. But can you use these tomatoes? Certainly you can. You just need to remove that bit. But since I'm just going to remove the skin right now, I'm just going to cut. Oh, no. You know what? I'm going to just cut that out. Let's go ahead and just remove that. And you could use this part to save seeds, which we'll do in another video. Now I'm just going to go ahead and pop this into the boiling water. Now I'm going to get seed gunk everywhere, but that's my choice. So yeah, you can use those. And something like this, the bad bits, just cut those out. Either before you put them in the water, or after. I really should do that after, so I'm going to start doing it after. And yeah, anyway, so when I'm processed, I'll come back to you guys. All right, so we've got all these tomatoes nicely peeled and cored and sitting in that bowl, and we're going to use the crushed tomato recipe from the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. There's 2 different recipes that are almost identical, and one is for water bath canning, which is what I'm going to do today, and the other is for pressure canning, which we could do as well. I just don't think I have enough tomatoes to warrant doing a pressure canner, although the time itself to cook is less. It takes longer to, I don't know. I'm just going to do water bath. How's that? Okay. So we've prepared our canner and lids, working in small batches. We've taken the skins off and any discolored parts, blah, blah, blah. Let's see, working in batches, quarter enough tomatoes to measure about 2 cups, transfer to a stainless steel saucepan and boil over medium heat using a potato masher. Crush, we're going to crush with our hands. Maintain a gentle boil and stir to prevent scorching. Quarter additional tomatoes and keep adding. Boil gently for 5 minutes. Okay, so what we need to do then is take these and put it into a pan on the stove and boil it down. Now this is the pan I used to peel these tomatoes, but I just don't have a great feeling about putting all those tomatoes in there. Is there going to be enough room? So I'm going to do a dry fit, for lack of a better term. I'm going to put them in there without turning anything on and just see if there's going to be enough room for me to have tomatoes and work around. All right, so I've got the tomatoes in here. I'm just doing a dry fit, you know, just to see if things will work. And I can tell, if I stopped there, I think that would be great. But I need to get this and the liquid in there. So me thinketh I'm going to go get my larger stock pot, which in this case is a canner, one of these enamel canners that I'm not using for today's project, and then we'll go ahead and use that to boil. I really need to get a big stock pot, and I thought I had one, but I have no idea where the hell it is. So anyway, let's switch out. All right, so I actually got my one of my pressure canners, since it's got a flatter bottom. And what the directions say to do is to quarter the tomatoes, put them in here, and then crush them with like a potato masher or something. But what I'm going to do is put my tomatoes in here and just crush them with my hand. And this way I can tell, like I just did with that one, that there's a little piece of core that still needs to come out. So I'll take that out, and I can just feel what I'm doing. And I just prefer to touch my food. What can I say? So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Unfortunately, my tripod is not tall enough to let you see this whilst I'm doing all of it. So how about I just start, and then we'll get back together in a minute. And all these will be in there. Get a copy of the ball canning book. It's a good book. Right, you guys, so we've got the crushed tomatoes boiling. And now we're going to start packing them into the jars. And I'm going to go ahead and add that citric acid instead of lemon juice. I think it leaves less of a flavor, but we're going to skip the salt. So we're going to come over here. Don't worry, you're not on camera. And I'm going to add half a teaspoon of citric acid. To each quart. And you notice I'm using a cutting board with edges here, so if any of the juice and stuff go over, we're okay. So I've got my ladle. Let me go a little closer. She can't go out her door.
No, she's after a fly.
Oh. So the directions also say to leave a generous ½ inch of headspace. And a ½ inch is going to be right around this second threading right here. So I'm just going to top it up a little bit. Good enough for me. I'll go ahead and move on to the second jar. I already had the citric acid in there. Go ahead and just fill her up. Just not going to do as many jars as I thought. It's always the case, isn't it? Again, we're going to come right up to about there. Okay. And remove this. Now, you can have a debubbler at home. I just use the back side of a spatula, make sure there's no bubbles in there. And often you'll do that and you'll see that this, where you filled up the headspace, will drop a little bit. And that one dropped a little bit, but barely. Crushed stuff, you don't find many air bubbles. Alright, both of those look good. Alright, so I've got a little container of vinegar here. It's 100% vinegar, and what I'm going to do is just wipe off the top of the jar so that this is nice and clean and the rubber from the ring can stick easily. So everything is still hot. Taking that off here. And to my left I have some rings and lids sitting in pretty hot water. You don't need to boil those anymore, just like you don't need to pre-sterilize your jars anymore. I'll link some more information about that below. And I don't think that ring's going to want to fit on there. Just finger tight, barely finger tight. That one's not going to want to go either. These are so hot. I swear these newer rings and some of the lids are just crap. Let's take an old one. Here's an oldie. No problemo. Okay, so now we're going to take them over, and I have the rack up in my water bath canner. I fit one right there. Zoom back. Grab the other one. Fit it right there. And now quickly I'm just going to go ahead and do the rest of them. Alright you guys, so I've got all those loaded up. It only came out to be 5 quarts. And let's see here. 35 minutes for quarts. No, for pints, and 45 minutes for quarts. So we are going to leave this up until the water comes to a rolling boil. Drop this down and then start the timer. Quick word of advice, you guys. If somebody asks you to help with the canning, go ahead and say yes. Just make sure they stay out of your way. Maybe they can do all your cleanup, because I can tell you that by far is the worst part of all canning, is the frickin' cleanup. So we're at a rolling boil. I'll show you what that looks like. Just what you think it does, but it needs to be the big bubbles. If it's the small bubbles, it ain't a rolling boil. Okay, and now the rack comes into play. We're going to go ahead and carefully lower this in, but while we're doing that, we're checking that water level. Because if I put too much water in there, and now is the time, it's going to overflow. And I want about 1 inch over the top of the jars, which is perfect, and it is. Now I'm going to put the lid on, turn this down to a boil, but I'm going to start the timer now for 45 minutes. Alright you guys, so this, the alarm is just going off for our tomatoes. So we've turned off the timer, and we're going to just pull these up. So I'm going to flip up the sides. This is always the tricky part, how to get that one to stay up. Flip up the sides of my cage here, and then I'm just going to lift it up into place. I don't have to do this. I could take the jars out from sitting in the bottom, but I just like to do it that way. I don't know why. It makes it easier, I think, on me to handle the jars. So you're definitely going to want to get a jar lifter, one of these, so you don't have to touch the jar, because that sucker will burn your frickin' hands off. And something I always try to remember to do first is to take the water off the top of the jars. Some people tilt the jars, but if you do that, you can potentially break a seal. I mean, if you've got a good seal, it shouldn't really do much, so I do it from time to time. If I'm lazy, but you really just don't do it. So on your counters, put down a nice towel. Even if you have granite and it can take the heat, put a towel down, because you don't want to shock the jars from going 212 degrees Fahrenheit onto a cold countertop, or a cool countertop, even if it's summertime. So one thing you're going to notice right away is the separation between the tomato and the tomato water. This is perfectly normal. So what's happened is that the more of the fluid has gone to the bottom and more of the matter is floated to the top. After these are fully cooled and sealed, we'll just kind of invert them once in a while before we put them away. But it's going to happen. This is it. It's what happens in the can. You just can't see it when you buy it at the grocery store. So anyway, I'm going to see how many of these have sealed. 2. So we're going to have these other ones probably start popping here any second. And we'll come back and check them a little later on and label them, and then we'll put them away into storage. Thanks for watching, you guys. And let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.